Kat and Elliot were never supposed to reach this point, but in episode 7, something finally snaps, and nothing feels the same anymore. A love that once felt steady now starts to crack in silence, and the worst part is not the argument, but the distance growing between them without even trying. Every look feels heavier, every word feels unfinished, and every moment together now carries a tension that cannot be ignored. It is not loud, it is not dramatic at first glance, but it is the kind of emotional shift that slowly changes everything. Kat finds herself standing at a point where her heart and her responsibilities are pulling her in completely different directions. She has spent so much time trying to fix what is broken around her, but in the process, she is losing something she never thought she would risk: her connection with Elliot. There is a quiet struggle inside her, as if she is trying to hold together two worlds that refuse to stay balanced. And the more she tries to stay strong, the more she starts to feel like she is falling apart in ways no one can see. Elliot, on the other hand, is reaching a breaking point that has been building up for a long time. It is not just about one moment or one mistake. It is everything he has held inside for too long. Questions that were never answered, feelings that were never fully understood, and a love that keeps getting pushed into the background by things neither of them can control. He starts to realize that loving someone does not always mean being able to stay with them, especially when truth and timing keep standing in the middle. Between them, something shifts in episode 7 that feels different from all the misunderstandings before. This is not just another disagreement that will be fixed with time or a simple conversation. It feels deeper, heavier, and more permanent. Even when they are standing close, it feels like they are miles apart. And the hardest part is that neither of them truly wants to let go, but both are starting to feel like holding on is becoming too painful. As the emotional tension builds, the meaning of working my way back to you starts to feel uncertain. Is it about healing and finding a way back to each other, or is it about accepting that some paths cannot return to where they started? Episode 7 does not give easy answers. Instead, it places Kat and Elliot in a space where love alone may not be enough to fix what has been broken. This opening moment of the episode sets the tone for everything that follows. It is quiet, emotional, and filled with unspoken truth. And by the end of it, one thing becomes clear. Whatever happens next between Kat and Elliot will not just change their relationship, it will change everything they thought they understood about each other. Kat and Elliot's situation going into episode 7 feels heavier than anything we have seen between them so far. This is not a fresh conflict, and it is not something that started suddenly. It is the result of everything building up slowly over time, like small cracks that were ignored until the surface could no longer hold. In earlier moments, they always managed to find their way back through conversation, understanding, or timing that somehow worked in their favor. But now, the space between them feels different. It feels harder to cross, even when they are standing in the same place. In the last episodes, Kat has been pulled deeper into situations that demand her full attention. Her focus is not just on her own emotions anymore. She is dealing with responsibilities that keep expanding, and every decision she makes seems to come with a cost. The more she tries to handle everything, the more she ends up leaving certain emotional things unresolved. Elliot has been one of those unresolved parts. Not because she does not care, but because she keeps getting pulled away before anything can be fully addressed. That pattern has slowly started to hurt him in ways he does not always express directly. Elliot has always been someone who tries to understand before reacting. He listens, he waits, and he gives space. But even patience has limits. Over time, he starts to notice a painful pattern where he is always waiting for clarity that never fully arrives. He begins to question not just what is happening between them, but also what place he truly holds in Kat's life. It is not jealousy or anger at first. It is confusion mixed with disappointment, and that slowly turns into emotional distance. What makes this situation even more complicated is that both of them are dealing with truths they cannot fully share. Kat is carrying knowledge and responsibilities that create barriers she cannot easily explain. Elliot, on the other hand, is left filling in the gaps with assumptions and feelings that grow heavier the less he understands. This lack of open communication becomes the silent force pushing them apart, even when neither of them intends for that to happen. There is also a shift in their interactions that becomes more noticeable in episode 7. The warmth that once came naturally between them now feels interrupted. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel careful, almost guarded. Even when they try to act normal, there is an undercurrent of tension that neither can fully hide. It is the kind of tension that builds not from one big moment, but from many small ones that were never fully resolved. Friends and people around them may not fully understand what is happening, because from the outside, it can still look like two people simply going through a rough phase. But emotionally, it is deeper than that. It is about trust slowly becoming uncertain and emotional safety starting to feel fragile. Kat is not unaware of this shift, but she is also overwhelmed by everything else happening in her life. Elliot is not blind to her struggles, but he is also reaching a point where understanding alone is no longer enough to keep him from feeling hurt. By the time episode 7 approaches, both of them are standing in a place where their past connection still exists, but it no longer feels stable enough to rely on. They are still connected, but the connection feels stretched, like it could snap at any moment. And that is what makes everything leading into this episode so emotionally charged. Nothing has fully broken yet, but nothing feels safe either. The first look at episode 7, Working My Way Back to You, immediately sets a very different emotional tone compared to earlier parts of the season. Everything shown feels quieter, more serious, and more uncertain. There is a clear sense that whatever happens in this episode is not just another small turning point, but something that changes the emotional direction of Kat and Elliot's story. Even the way scenes are framed gives the feeling that space is growing between them, both physically and emotionally. One of the most noticeable things in the preview is the use of silence and distance. Kat and Elliot are not shown with their usual comfort around each other. Instead, there are moments where they are in the same environment, but not truly together. This kind of framing suggests that their connection is no longer flowing naturally. It feels interrupted, like something is constantly standing between what they feel and what they are able to express. Even without words, the tension is clearly visible. The title, Working My Way Back to You, adds another layer of meaning that makes the situation even more complex. At first, it may sound like a romantic idea of returning to someone you care about, but in the context of what is happening between Kat and Elliot, it can also suggest something much more painful. It could mean trying to rebuild something that has already started to fall apart. It could also mean realizing that getting back to where they once were will take more effort than either of them expected, or may not even be fully possible in the same way. In the teaser moments, there are subtle signs that communication between them is breaking down. Instead of open conversations, there are pauses, unfinished thoughts, and reactions that feel restrained. These small details are important because they show that the real conflict is not always loud or dramatic. It is happening in the gaps between words, in the hesitation before speaking, and in the choice to stay silent instead of explaining everything. Another key detail in the first look is how emotional weight seems to follow Kat in every moment she appears. She does not look fully present, as if part of her mind is always somewhere else. This gives the impression that she is carrying decisions and consequences that are not easy to share. Her expressions suggest internal conflict, like she is constantly balancing what she wants with what she feels she has to do. This emotional split makes her feel distant, even when she is physically close to others. Elliot's presence in the preview carries a different kind of emotional energy. There is a sense of frustration mixed with sadness, as if he has reached a point where waiting is no longer simple. His reactions suggest that he is trying to understand Kat, but also struggling with the emotional cost of not being fully understood in return. There is a quiet buildup in his character that feels like he is holding back words that could change everything if they were finally spoken. What stands out most in this first look is the feeling that both characters are trying, but in different directions. Kat seems focused on holding things together in her world, while Elliot seems focused on finding clarity in theirs. This difference in emotional direction creates distance, even when their intentions are not to drift apart. It becomes less about conflict and more about mismatch in timing, truth, and emotional availability. The overall atmosphere of episode 7's preview feels heavier than usual, as if something important is approaching its breaking point. There is no clear resolution shown, only pieces of emotion that do not fully connect yet. That incomplete feeling is what makes the episode feel so tense. It suggests that answers are coming, but they may not be the answers either of them are hoping for.